Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Searching for Political Identity. I am Brian Escow, and I am pleased to be with you. As always, really, it's an honor to be able to continue sharing my journey with you, and to have my health and the free time on the weekend. It's just a real blessing. So let's get right into it. Okay, got a lot to get to. There's a lot going on. I will say very quickly, when I first started this podcast 4.5 years ago while studying critical race theory in my final year of law school, I remember thinking, man, I'm really busy. I'm in school, I'm working, but I got to start this podcast now because eventually when Trump is gone, there won't be all this crazy shit going on. And little did I know that all these years later, we'd still be right in the middle of a shitstorm. So it's this. I say it's a shitstorm. It's an interesting time with a figure like Trump, and with the media and the establishment being what it is in our country. There's a lot to unpack. So never a dull moment, right? So what I'm going to do here is follow the form that I seem to have developed in this new season, which is I have a couple quick hits I want to get through, and then I'll do my three main topics. The three main topics, just a little preview today, are more rabbi lessons about marriage, Gavin Newsom, and John Quincy Adams. So, with that said, let me take a sip of coffee and do my quick hits. All right. Okay. So, I promised my followers on X that I would start the show by telling a story that I forgot to tell during last week's episode. And here's the context really quickly. At the end of last week's episode, I did a quick segment about aliens. Basically, the point being, hey, look, everyone's talking about it. It's crazy, right? It's a topic that interests me. And there's a reason for that. And I told a story about a dinner I had with a random guy, which led me to really think that there might be something going on here with this alien talk, which you can go listen to that conversation if you want to hear it. I won't retell it. And then there was another story I told. I said about something I saw in the sky, a UFO, straight up. The dinner party I had was a year ago. About what I saw in the sky was about 5 months ago, just for a timeline. So I will tell you what I saw on the morning of March 4th in just a moment. But just to wrap it up here about the context, I'm saying, hey, this is an interesting topic. There seems to be a lot of smoke. Maybe there's fire. Maybe it's a psyop. I don't know. But I promised myself, I said, if I'm going to spend time on this alien shit or interdimensional, you have representatives going on Joe Rogan talking about interdimensional beings now. We're in like new waters here, people. Okay. Either there's some extravagant psyop going on, or we are on the verge of disclosure about extraterrestrials, interdimensional beings, and can we handle it? Yeah. But I promised myself, hey, if you're going to entertain this kind of stuff, Brian, spend an equal amount of time on concrete things that affect people here on Earth. Just in case you're losing your mind, you can at least say, hey, I did spend half the time on Medicare, So we're not going to cover entitlements today, but in general, that's my rule. Okay. That's the context. Everyone's talking about aliens. I got to get in on the fun. It's an unbelievable, mind-blowing concept. Okay. So yeah, I watch all the Netflix shows. It's in pop culture. I have a dinner with this random guy who makes me go, Jesus, you're telling me this shit is real and you're on the inside? Like, holy crap. So that's fine. So I'm like, all right, maybe there's something going on here, but that's it. I'm minding my business. And then March 4th comes around earlier this year. It's 5:15 a.m. Let me back up. It's 5:10 a.m. and I take my dog out, as I do every morning, for what I call a short loop. In the apartment community where we live, there's medium loops, there's big loops, there's a short loop. The short loop is the only loop that takes us out of the apartment complex and onto the main road. Okay. It's a big apartment complex. There's all these interior roads. So we step out of the stairwell. It's, a couple minutes after 5 a.m. We walk for a few minutes, and then we get to the point where we're about to leave the property and go onto that main road. And the reason I bring that detail up is I'm telling you, there was a 5-story apartment building. We were right at the base of it, walking alongside it, and so it was kind of obstructing my view of the sky. It's dark out, by the way. It's completely dark out still. And so we turned the corner onto the main road, and now I've got nothing but open sky above me as we're walking onto the sidewalk of the main road. So what do? I look up, right? It's a normal thing to do. I see the moon is doing its thing. It's kind of like a full moon, nice and white, obviously. Well, usually it's white, right? Don't talk. We're not doing a critical race theory detour just because the moon's white. All right. All right, guys. So we clear the apartment building. I look up for no reason other than I'm the kind of guy who likes to look up. And what I saw was extraordinary. What I saw was a bright orange ball. I guess you could call it a sphere, you call it an orb. It was about 2 helicopter distances off the ground above my head, streaking from east to west, coming over the apartment building, flying west quickly, silently, and it was a bright orange ball. Your first thought is that doesn't belong there. Your first thought is pumpkin? Like what? What? So it's doing its thing and it's just absolutely shocking. And I see it for about a total of 30 seconds before it disappears into the horizon toward the ocean where it was traveling. But it wasn't just a static orange ball the entire time. See, what happened was for the first 2 seconds that I saw it, it was the orange ball. And then after 2 seconds, it was like the orange stuff was an energy shield straight out of a video game, straight out of Halo that just turned off. And all of a sudden, so after 2 seconds, the orange ball deactivates. And all I see are these 3 downlights in the shape of an equilateral triangle against what is presumably a black craft, which is indistinguishable from the black sky for 2 seconds. And then boom, the shield's back on and it's the orange ball again. That happens for about 30 seconds. I see about 15 cycles, shield on, shield off. And then it's out of sight. And that's it. I had my phone in my hand. I'm sure of it. I mean, it's always in my hand. I was just like totally floored. Rosie thought it was extraordinary. No. So I'm not saying it was aliens, but what I am saying was I'm not an aviation guy. I don't know anything about anything, but that wasn't normal. Okay. Even the black triangular crafts, I've never heard of people saying orange shields. So that's it. I don't need to drag the story on much more than that. That's what I saw. And so when you combine that with the dinner I had with that guy, I just go, fuck it. I've become one of these people who's more inclined to believe that there's something crazy going on. So that's where I'll leave that for now. All right. Other quick hits. We saw Shucked on Friday. Shucked is a play. We've been going to the theater a lot. Very privileged existence that we live. And it was fun. It was good. It was silly. It wasn't the best play we've seen. It was kind of derivative of Book of Mormon, which was amazing. But the singing was amazing. The music was really good. So, the corny jokes, the kind of fairly uneventful story, it's fine. It was fine. We had a good time. We laughed. So, just giving you a little flavor of what we did this weekend. We saw Shucked, and Shucked sucked. Well, that would be a fun headline, but it was okay. It kind of sucked, but it was also, again, the singing was amazing. Okay, next one. Wedding update. Yeah, so I don't know, like 2 weeks ago, the wedding invitations went out, and I was talking to my mom, and she's like, it's getting real. My son's getting married. So it's just a great thing. It's a blessing. The closer we get, the better I feel about it. The more time I spend with Alexa's family, the better I feel about them. I mean, it's just, I got really lucky. I am marrying a great woman, period. So I guess that's really it. We had a tasting. We were in Arizona where the wedding's going to be. It's because where her parents are. So we chose our custom his and her drinks, and we tasted the sea bass, and it's all going to be great. It's all going to be fine. So, it just underscores how much my life has changed in recent years. Going to law school, work evolving, maturing, um, my Jewish identity developing, my political identity developing. A time of change, but a time of a lot of positivity. So that's the wedding update. I'll get to the rabbi lessons, which are kind of a subset of the wedding update in a moment. Next quick hit, though, is this story I saw. I guess the magazine is called Futurism. You may have heard of it. I think I was flipping through the app called Flipboard, and this one caught my eye. So I read it. And here's a name for you. A gentleman, first of all, rest in peace. He passed away, sadly. This guy who was in his 80s. His name was Thongbu Wangbandu. I mean, there's a joke there about aliens, but I won't make it. But whatever nationality he was a man living in New Jersey. And perhaps he was American. I don't know. But it's a very sad story. Check this out. So he's in his 80s. Apparently, he had a stroke when he was in his late 60s or early 70s, and he was cognitively impaired to some degree from that. Um, doesn't It's not clear from the story how impaired, but he had some complications from that stroke. So he's doing his thing. He's on Instagram or he's on Meta, whatever, and he's talking to a chatbot that he doesn't know is a chatbot. And the chatbot has a picture of like Kylie Jenner or something. Apparently, Meta used to allow randomly named chatbots to have the appearance of celebrities, and that is no longer allowed. But this guy started his conversation like 4 years ago, and so it's been ongoing. And so he's talking to someone who he thinks looks like Kylie Jenner or Kendall Jenner, whoever, and they're chatting it up. And he's got a wife, by the way, who's like 80 also, and he's got a daughter, and the wife's alive. Sip of coffee. Hold on. And basically, the chat bot tells him one day, "Hey, I'm real. Come, I want to meet up." And so it gives him an apartment, an address, and a gate code, and all of that in New York City. So he packs his suitcase, and his wife and his daughter are like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Don't worry about it. I've got something to take care of." And he goes to New York by himself. And if I recall correctly, he was like descending down a subway station, the stairs to a subway station. He tripped and fell and cracked his head open and died. All right. So, I mean, terrible. But that story, I think, will go down, should be kind of part of our collective understanding of these new technologies and the dangers they pose. An interesting, very sad story. Rest in peace, Thong Bu, and condolences to his family. Something to think about. You know, I come from the age of people who were talking a smarter child, the first chatbot, right? So here we are. Hopefully, the future is not dark. Hopefully, the future is bright. But speaking of dark and bright, actually, it's a good segue to my next note. I was pulling into work the other day, and the sun was up. It was 7 a.m. It was already up, but it was so damn cloudy that the sun literally looked like the moon. And I've never experienced. I go, dude, is that the moon or the sun? And it just made me think. You can kind of do a analogy there to misinformation, information, the age of information. To me, it's the lesson is, hey, let's all, myself, you, everyone on any side, let's all retain some humility and give people some grace. It is kind of hard to know what's right and true these days. And so maybe I've got it all wrong. Maybe my haters have it all wrong. Either way, we should all reserve a little space for grace and humility, because it's just, there's a lot of information out there and it's hard to know who to believe. And you go online, and no matter what you say, you'll get praised for it, you'll get shit on for it, and each of them will be really sincere. So you have to have a strong moral compass. You have to have a strong command of the facts. You have to have integrity. So I'm in trouble. All right. We are making way here. Yeah, we really are living in essentially two nations, two separate echo chambers. I would never want to fuel the fires of division, but I think you have to take honest stock of where we are. And you know, psychologically, we seem to be in two different places. And so, believe it or not, despite some of my provocative rhetoric on Twitter, this project, this podcast started off as and still is partly a reflection of my desire to want to do good, to want to make a positive impact on the country, to bring people together. But I thought as I became this hardcore Trump supporter in the last year, damn, I'm losing my ability to do that, to play that role of neutral arbiter. Of course, I'm never unbiased and no one's unbiased, but I pride myself on kind of looking objectively at the facts and doing my thing and maintaining my independence. And it's hard to do that when you're a big Trump guy now. But I go back to a phrase one of my friends on Twitter said to me. He goes, "You can't mend fences while sitting on them." So that's the whole point of this second season. I'm not done searching for political identity. I want to be a force for good and to, if not unify, help people see each other more clearly. I think I can do that and I want to, but I'm not, although I'm still searching for my political identity, I'm not undecided. I proudly voted for Trump. I'm a Trump guy now, warts and all. So, anyway, okay. Let me know. Okay, quick comment on Hillary. There's a video going around of her kind of acknowledging that Trump has done some good things in the first few months of his second term, and I went as far as to retweet it last night and say I could see myself voting for Hillary again if she continues down this path. That's my way of saying I'm independent, bro. Like, I'm looking for a competent leader who can explain their views clearly, who loves America. If she checks those boxes next cycle, now, and I'm obviously getting shit on for it, and she's a traitor, and everyone's a traitor. Look, I'm not going to go into Obamagate, Russiagate right now. I covered that in the first episode of season 2, and nothing has changed for me since then. I will continue, of course, to maintain an open mind, and it's just a lot to swallow. Talk about a lot aliens and shit. It's a lot to swallow to think that the people you were supporting previously could be evil, could be treacherous. I don't want to believe it, and based on what I know, I don't believe it. However, one of the reasons I came over to the Trump team is I realize he's been through a lot of bullshit and it's been unfair. And so I have to reconcile that. And so I'm still in the process of doing that. And so forgive me if Hillary is an evil lizard person, monster, traitor. Seriously. I mean, but also at the same time, keep a little space in your mind. Maybe I'm right. Maybe you guys are a little too extreme and we should all be able to have a little grace towards each other. And if she wants to come into a common sense mindset, then maybe it's appropriate to say, hey, look, she's a competent woman. She's an accomplished woman. She's an impressive woman. Let's do this thing. I don't know. We'll see, right? All right. Sip of coffee here. Sip of coffee. We're getting close. Close to our main topics. Okay. Male cheerleaders. Okay. Look, first of all, people are saying that there have always been male cheerleaders. I was like, yeah, okay, but not like this. Not like this. It reminds me of that great line from The Irishman. Not like this. Not like this. Look, I understand the discomfort. I mean, let's be real. Most straight men don't want to see displays of homosexual tenderness. We just really don't. I mean, that's the truth. Okay. That's just the truth. Now, I'm not homophobic. I'm not transphobic. And the reason I say that is because I want to acknowledge people who don't want to see that stuff. They're not necessarily transphobic or homophobic either. Sometimes people just feel uncomfortable because they're wired differently. And what I would say to that is, look, I understand people who are really against these male cheerleaders and the trans cheerleaders. I get it, man. I do get it. This is football. This is your domain, and you're sick and tired. Part of this whole woke thing is you're sick and tired of this cultural imposition. You want to be gay? Be gay. You're free to do it, but don't come into my football stadium. And to that, I would say, look, It's not your football stadium. It's not. And at least it's not the government. It's a totally different thing when it's the government or a school saying, this is what we're going to teach you. It's a completely different thing when it's a private institution. So I get it. It's probably, first of all, cheerleaders always creep me out. Always. I would always think, man, if I ever have a daughter, I hope she's not a cheerleader. No disrespect. And that's probably ignorant. I was just never totally that comfortable with cheerleaders. But so I'm fine with it. Look, it's totally fine by me. It's not, you know, it's not going to ruin my day. Okay. I get it. You don't want to feel like they're shoving uh, culture down your throat and trying to make you feel guilty. But that's not what's happening here. So what I say is, take a deep breath. And if you don't want to watch the game anymore, don't watch the game. But it's not the government. So I think that makes a big difference. And at the end of the day, look, people are born the way they're born, and they you need to make room for them in society and treat them with dignity and respect. And there is a fine line between doing that and then allowing a woke situation where the mainstream culture, you're suddenly feeling condemned. There's a big difference between letting someone have space and culture and letting them overtake it and make you feel guilty for not being gay or something like that. You know what I'm saying? All right. I don't know if that was such a great explanation, but I hope I conveyed my true feelings on the subject, which are, it's okay to feel uncomfortable, but you got to make room for people. All right. And then, of course, being someone who was so against critical race theory for the last year, of course, there is a line that I recognize too, where it's like, all right, you know, maybe third grade story time in public school is not the place. And again, you could feel like an NFL game is not the place either, but there's a big difference between those two venues. Anyway, last comment here before we get into the main things is about Trump's, is also related to actually critical race theory and culture and woke stuff. And that is this idea that Trump is purging from various museums or the military, various institutions, any reference to black people or things like that. And my comment is this: I haven't done the research to say on each issue, he's wrong here, he's right here, he's wrong here. But this is my rule. And I would say apply this rule to any scenario. And from there, you can decide, you'll be able to know how I feel about Trump's actions. And it's very simple. If you're combing through an institution and you're simply trying to remove any reference to black people or non-white people for no other reason other than you want to erase that and whitewash the history, then that's wrong. It's completely wrong, and I don't support it. And I would really hope, I really hope that that's not what's going on. My suspicion is that Trump has ordered, Pete Hegseth or whoever's running the Museum of Natural History or whatever the hell museum it was, saying, hey, review everything. And if there's anything in there that serves no purpose other than to incite a guilty feeling in people who love America, then remove it. If he's saying, hey, if basically I don't want people to be punished walking through the museum. Now, look, you want a museum to be real. A museum has to be real. It cannot be a propaganda chamber. So if he's removing stuff to whitewash history, that's bad. If he's removing stuff to enable someone to walk through the museum or walk through the Defense Department with pride, no matter who you are, then I support it. You know what I'm saying? So, look, the calculation I've made is that he's not a bad guy. He's not a racist. He's not a white supremacist. And so I'd be shocked if what's actually going on is any sort of purging of culture to that degree. All right. Rabbi lessons back by popular demand. So I will, in a future episode, talk at length about what it means to be Jewish to me, my Jewish identity. For right now, it's enough to say it's a learning process. I was raised, look, I went to summer camp as a Jew, as a kid, raised to support Israel and believe that Israel was a refuge for the Jewish people who were targeted in World War II. And I come from a family of survivors. So that's the foundation that's deep down. Now, layered on top of that were years as an agnostic, atheist, and now I'm kind of leaning back into my spiritual side as I get older, and I got to confront my Jewish identity as I do that. But I feel Jewish. I know I'm a Jew. So let's say that for now. But I always have a great time with this rabbi who's going to be marrying us. He's apparently a very rising star in the Jewish community, so we're lucky to have him. And as I mentioned earlier, we were in Arizona last weekend for some wedding stuff, and we did meet the rabbi and his wife, and we got some more notes that I'm about to go through with you. This was so previously I had met with him once one-on-one over Zoom, and I shared the lessons in the first episode of this second season. Last week we met as a group, the four of us, his wife and Alexa and I will go through the notes in a moment. And I just met with him this morning over Zoom. So I think I will also share what I learned this morning. Excuse me. All right. So, first of all, you walk into the synagogue, and the first thing you see is the pictures of all the hostages. And it just hits you. You go, fuck. Like, and now I know every group, every tribe, every culture has their wall with their people who have suffered and are dying. So, but I got to be honest, when you walk in and you see that, you just go, damn, we were victims of a brutal attack. And so, how's that for a starting point? But anyway, so we sit down with them, and basically they say this a good life, according to Jewish law, a good married life is based on three things: Torah, prayer, and good deeds. So, study the Torah, learn God's commands, pray. And it was interesting when he talked about prayer. He said, ask God for things, tell God what you want. And I always thought of prayer as like the only thing I ever really had the balls to ask God for was health for people I loved and good things, good outcomes for people I love and all my friends and all of that. But really, I just really, I say a prayer for the whole world, if I'm being honest, but I just thank God for my blessings. I don't feel like I'm in a position to be asking God for anything. So that was kind of interesting. And also good deeds. Be charitable. And so that was really another interesting piece. Sorry, there's like hair in my water and on my microphone now. What kind of person do you want to be? What kind of home do you want to have? Home is a sanctuary for God. What kind of lives do you want to live? Right? Your wedding day is essentially starting fresh with a new life. So you better set your intentions right on that day. Be charitable on that day. Give to charity that day. Study the Torah frequently that day. Pray to God often on that day, that kind of thing. But I like how he gives the mystical background. It's interesting. You're talking to an Orthodox rabbi, and there's all these rules, and there are rules, and we talked about rules today. But I like how he's giving me all the mystical background stuff. That stuff, I eat it up. So I'm like, hey, I'm happy to keep meeting with you if you're going to talk about souls and stuff like that. But yeah, he said, according to Jewish tradition, you are basically a half a soul when you come into this world, and it's predetermined that you have a soul mate, and marriage is the day that you become one soul. Your soul becomes united. It's the day, he said, your relationship goes from being this was such a great line, from being a question mark to a period. You know. Other quick notes, though, is interestingly that your partner comes before your kids. They have 10 kids. So it was interesting to hear him say that. So according to Jewish tradition, and I think it was one of the Kelsey wives who has a successful podcast. My Alexa sent me a clip, and it was like she was saying, I have my kids and I love my kids with, more than I can love anything other being, but I chose my husband, so I'm going to honor him like he's going to be the primary object of my affection because I chose him, right? And so that kind of actually tied to the rabbi's point pretty well there. Nonetheless, it was clear from the rabbi's discussion how important kids are, what a blessing kids are, and how important their education is. So, okay, that was cool. So these lessons weren't as esoteric and interesting, perhaps, as the first round, but nonetheless, I think they were still very helpful. A little more here, though, talking once again about the power of words. Um, I don't know how we came about talking about this. I must have mentioned we have Rosie and how much we love our dog. And he said, "Oh, isn't that interesting? The word for dog is actually the Hebrew word for dog is like something like Kevlav or something. And that translates to all heart because the dogs are all heart. And so then he goes on to say, the word in Hebrew for word is the word for bee, like a bee sting. And so the power of words, they can produce honey or they can sting. And so, yeah, no, in Orthodox Judaism, I guess, there's a real emphasis on the power of words. And then the last note I have from that meeting is how every crisis is an opportunity. Isn't that a good one? Every crisis is an opportunity. So I think for me, it's like, to the extent you want to call my journey here a political identity crisis, an identity crisis, well, look, it's an opportunity. So that is a great one to have in your back pocket, I think. All right, let's move. Oh, lessons from today. Should I go through them? Well, look, it was basically the nitty gritty, uh, less interesting, probably, you might say, on an intellectual level, rules for how to deal with a woman's period and how there are lots of rules for Orthodox men and women, man and wife, about how to interact around the woman's cycle. And rules pertaining to how you eat together, how you sleep together, how you touch each other or don't touch each other, and everything else. Um, how you communicate, you know, it's pretty interesting. I guess I don't need to go through it, but I think the biggest point here actually is the greatest yearning for any husband or wife, he said, is to be known. That resonated, right? So to be known. He said there are, back to the words thing, there are 4 words for sex in the Torah. Well, he gave me 3 examples, so maybe there was only 3. And I don't have the words written down, but something with Joseph, when someone says to lie with, hey, Joseph, with the multicolored dream coat, you're going to lie down with me, sleep with me. So there's a word meaning sleep with me. There's a word meaning to expose nakedness, which the rabbi said really refers to an external layer being exposed, but nothing internal. And then he said there's the word that was used with regard to Adam and Eve. And as you probably know, the word is Adam knew Eve. And so that is the deeper meaning of sexual relations, to know the other person. And so the rabbi said, look, when you're in the ideal relationship, you're going to feel known and you're going to know the other. So, anyway, that's all I got for rabbi lessons. Shall we move on to Gavin Newsom? Okay. Gavin Newsom, the story is he's fighting fire with fire. Well, first of all, it started with this redistricting, excuse me, story. Texas, Trump called for Abbott to redistrict in the middle of the 10-year period. I guess I always thought that congressional redistricting was something that happened every 10 years per the Constitution, but it actually doesn't have to be every 10 years. It's there's discretion for the states. So Trump said, hey, Texas, do your thing, redistrict. And the lawmakers fled and, took refuge in other states. And, typical Democrat problem, they're trying to show courage. And so they're fleeing. And then they're saying, come and take it, referring to that old Texas slogan. It's like, You can't say come and take it like you're a badass Texan when you're fled your state. Anyway, um, Newsom said, "Hey, if Texas does it, I'm gonna do something similar, so long as the California voters approve, because they have to. We're gonna try to redistrict as well. We're gonna fight fire with fire." So okay, that's one thing, standing up for his team, and that's fine. I've rather like that. But he's also fighting fire with fire with well, actually, should I tell my Gavin Newsom story first? All right, let me tell my story about meeting him, and then I'll get into this whole mocking Trump's tweets thing. First of all, so I believe it was March of 2023. The company I work for um, is a supporter of something called the LGBTQ Victory Fund, which supports LGBTQ people in their efforts to run for office nationwide. It's a very cool organization. And we've gone a couple times to support, and it's a very colorful event, and we always have a good time, and that's that. And so in 23, um, I went, and Gavin Newsom was there, and um, I was talking with some of my coworkers, just chatting with them, and he comes over, and we say hi to him, or he didn't come over, but we found him and we said hi to him, and we had a brief interaction with him, and it was fine. It was cool. I mean, he was doing his thing. He was very charismatic. I mean, we know he's very charismatic. I mean, he was working the crowd, doing his thing. He had just the right amount of makeup on. Um, he was in good spirits. So that was fine. And so we said, okay, we did it. We got a picture with him. I looked like shit, by the way. I was overweight. I had just gone through a breakup. I was in a bad place. So I can't post that photo even if I wanted to, but that was cool. And so then we said, all right, let's get away from him. Let's leave him alone. We had our little moment. So we go across this little courtyard area over to the coffee area, and we have some coffee and chill. And moments later, we see him like a shark through the water. I see Newsom's hair. He's walking towards us. And we're like, geez, is he following us? And then we realized, oh, no, he just wants coffee. So here we are again in front of him. And I had the opportunity to make a little joke. He poured some coffee. And I said, hey, when you're governor, don't you have people who can pour your own coffee? He liked that. And so that was my little Gavin Newsom moment. Then he hops up on a little stool or a little bench, and he gives a little impromptu stump speech, and people were eating it up. New Gav, they're chanting. And at the time, Trump and Biden were not locked in as the candidates. They were really encouraging him to run, and he was taking aim actually at DeSantis. He thought this. See, I don't know if he actually thought DeSantis was going to be the nominee, or if he just thought it's safer to attack DeSantis because they're both governors, they're foils for each other. For whatever reason, he was attacking DeSantis. And I was just like, I wasn't a Trump guy at the time yet, remember? But I was just like, whatever. Like, I don't particularly agree with his attacking DeSantis. I like DeSantis. I'm starting to feel more comfortable with that side. But at the same time, I like how he's sticking up for trans people. I like how he's sticking up for the dignity. He might be wrong on some of the issues. He might be wrong on some of the particulars. But I do like how he wants to be a protector of the underdog. Come on. Who wouldn't want that? That's a good thing. That's a good thing. So anyway. So that's my Gavin Newsom story. And I want to say, like, could I get around to supporting him again? Like, first of all, what I will say is I feel like I could get to a place where I forgive him for COVID. I feel like I could get to a place where I forgive Cuomo for COVID. Um, it's it was such a bizarre event, and maybe I'm being too lenient, but I am just a really optimistic kind of friendly guy, I guess, who wants to give people grace, who wants to be able to give people grace. I don't want to hold this once in a century event over someone's head because they got it wrong. Maybe I should. Maybe I should. But so just starting with that, I will say. So my thing is, he's got everything. So if you forgive him for COVID, let's just throw COVID out for a second. If you throw that out, he's got everything you want in a governor, in a politician, except the record. He's got the skills, the charisma. He's got the looks. He's got the dexterity. He can dance on his feet, can think on his feet. But California doesn't have a good rep. Homeless, thief, crime, mismanagement. He did veto a bill that would have outlawed the caste system, which I thought was very brave of him. I go, at least he vetoed a bill that outlawed the caste system. Saying we don't need that. Thank you. Thank you for some sanity here, Governor. But so he's got all the tools except the record. So he's an interesting case. I don't think I could get around to supporting him, but I just want to recognize. So about this mocking Trump stuff. Here's my thoughts with the tweets. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, one of his staffers is using ChatGPT to write tweets in Trump's voice. So they're all caps, they're kind of mean, and it's funny and it's working. They're not doing a bad job of it. It's getting attention. It's raising Newsom's profile. You know what the problem with it is? It's not original. It's performative. That's a big problem. That to me is why I would say, Gavin Newsom, if I'm advising you, cut that shit out immediately. It's a joke, bro. And people say to me, how could you be such a hypocrite when your guy does that all the time? Okay, yeah, but there's only one Trump. So all I'm saying is it may be hypocritical. I'm copping to that. I'm a hypocrite. All I'm saying is you don't beat Trump. These people never really learned how to beat Trump. Trump would have whipped Gavin's ass one-on-one. I don't know if he would have whipped Obama. That's a race I would have liked to see. But he would have whipped Newsom because Newsom can't go beyond Trump. And so maybe he can, but he's not doing it. He's matching Trump, and that is a recipe to fail. So when I say he's got great skills, what I mean is when he was asked about this at a press conference, they said, what about your tweets mocking Trump? And he immediately pivoted to, you're outraged at my tweets mocking Trump? How about where's the outrage for Trump that we've allowed to normalize this? That's a very good response. It's very quick on his feet. But again, it doesn't separate him from the pack. It doesn't separate him from the pack. You need to rise above. To get elected as a Democrat in the next cycle, I think you need to rise above and you need to acknowledge the good things about Trump and be your own person. Can Newsom do that? Maybe, but I'm not sure. Okay. I think I've said everything about Newsom I want to say there. Now let's get into John Quincy Adams. The reason I want to talk about him is because I started reading Profiles in Courage by JFK. And this is a collection of chapters that Kennedy wrote about certain figures in the Senate, U.S. Senate throughout history, who acted bravely, who acted independently, who bucked their party's interest for a more broad interest, for the national interest, brave people who are worthy of mentioning. Profiles in Courage. And so first comment here is Kennedy is an amazing writer, okay? And I'll circle back to the chapter intro, the introduction to the chapter about John Quincy Adams, because it's so elegantly written. Later, at the end of this segment, I'll circle back to it. But Kennedy's a great writer, and he paints an amazing picture of the Puritan ethos. The Puritan statesman is cold, charmless, and totally devoted to serving God and his country. And Quincy Adams in particular was a completely charmless man who had no friends. He wasn't likable. He pissed people off. He beefed with his own party, and he didn't care. He supported Jefferson, who was the man who succeeded his father as president, who belonged to a different party. And so they're like, dude, you're the son of Federalist President John Adams. Democratic Republican Thomas Jefferson is in office. He's doing all these things we Federalists don't support, and you're supporting Jefferson. What the fuck? And Quincy Adams just didn't care. So this was a cold existence for maybe any Puritan, in the sense that the Puritan ethos is about hard work, about discipline, right? Not about self-interest. And he does all these things to alienate himself among his colleagues, and he doesn't make any friends. But the only ray of warmth, as Kennedy writes, in this existence for John Quincy Adams is the relationship between him and his father. His father supported him when his party deserted him for two little instances. I'll tell two little examples of why his party deserted him in a minute. But when that happened, John Adams supported John Quincy Adams, and that meant the world to the son, to Quincy. And so they were both, father and son, fiercely independent. And that really resonates with me. I've always marched to my own drum. My dad means a lot to me. So, and he's an independent political thinker. So that really hits. So, sip of water here. Why did John Quincy Adams beef with his Federalist Party so often? Well, here are the two examples mentioned in the book. The first one, actually, this is chronologically first. Yeah. The Louisiana Purchase. Thomas Jefferson purchases Louisiana from France. The Federalists opposed it. Get this. The Federalists opposed the Louisiana Purchase because they feared the political shift and economic implications of westward expansion. They had their interests in their local economy, and if we grow the country to the west, we're going to lose political clout. Our economy is going to be diluted, and so they were against it. And Adams envisioned a bi-coastal USA. He didn't want Napoleon on our doorstep. And so he said, I don't care if our economy suffers, if our political interests are diminished, Federalist Party. I see a greater interest at play here for the United States of America, and I'm going to support that. And he did that. And he went to these meetings in support of the Louisiana Purchase. He went to a celebratory party that Jefferson threw, that the Democratic Republicans threw, and his Federalist Party said, that's it. We're done with you. That was in like 1803. And his father, and so John Quincy Adams writes to his dad, what do you think of my actions here? And his dad writes back, I support you. I think you've been in the right here. So imagine that, this cold Puritan being comforted by his dad in that interesting act of political defiance, political courage. Very interesting. So aside from the Louisiana Purchase, there was something called the Embargo Act, which I believe was 1808. And the goal of the Embargo Act, which Thomas Jefferson championed, so this was not a product of the Federalists. The goal of the Embargo Act was to pressure Britain and France, can I read, into respecting American neutrality. Because what Britain would do, you always hear about Britain impressing American soldiers. It would seize our ships and say, hey guys, your colonies, basically, we don't recognize your independence, your neutrality. Come work for us, sailors. You're now soldiers in our war against France. The goal was to stop that from happening by if the embargo, I believed, basically said we will do no trading with foreign nations, none whatsoever. That way, our soldiers are going to be protected, and so we're going to punish ourselves. We're going to punish our trading partners, all to lay this hard line down of you will respect our ships and our seamen. But the problem was, again, it was going to destroy the New England economy. And it was perceived by the Federalists as an intentional act of political punishment by Jefferson to the Federalist economies. And Adams didn't care. He was too outraged by the idea that we wouldn't stand up on two legs and lash out strongly against any nation who seized our sailors. And so he writes to his colleague, we're going to lose our jobs over this, but private interest can never take precedence above public interest. Wow. That's a profile in courage. Now, I said I was going to circle back to Kennedy being such a great writer. And in the very beginning of the chapter, he opens the chapter on Quincy Adams by saying, here was this young senator from Massachusetts, sitting in his office in the Senate, and he's shuffling through mail, from constituents and so forth. Interesting. Before we had Facebook, before we had online, we still had ways of communicating with your representatives. Very interesting, right? So he's sitting there, he's listening to one of his colleagues go off against the Embargo Act for the 100th time. And he's like, he's got his feelings very strong about it. Anyway, Adams is, as Kennedy paints this beautiful picture, Adams is listening to his colleague rail against the Embargo Act for the millionth time, and he notices on his desk an envelope that's unmarked, and it catches his eye. And he opens up the envelope, and it just says, you know, Lucifer, son of the morning, something very poetic and intense to get his attention, basically saying, you have become this devil, Adams. And it says, awaken, Adams, awaken, return to your country, signed a Federalist. And so what you gather after reading the chapter is that was a Federalist imploring Adams not to sell out his region. Now it's interesting because a Federalist, you would think, has the interests of the entire country at heart, but these Federalists had a more narrow interest. And so Adams is scoffing at this, going, "A Federalist? Am I not a Federalist? My father was the last Federalist president. I supported this Federalist cause, that Federalist cause. Just because I'm displaying some independence, you dare accuse me of not being a Federalist?" That kind of thing. And so the reason I mention it is because, one, it's a great piece of writing to start the chapter. You go, wow, that sets the tone. But also, I get a lot of similar messages. I have a guy on Twitter who said to me just an hour ago before I came here to record, and I said something like, Trump, who I've come to like and admire, cannot be allowed to run for a third term unless the Constitution is amended. Look at me. Look how independent I am. Standing, I mean, and and he goes, awaken, Brian, awaken, America. And I go, damn, that sounds eerily like the piece of mail John Quincy Adams got when he was listening to his colleague rail against the Embargo Act. So all of this to say, I want to be an independent man. I am an independent man. I want to continue to be an independent man. Just because I've become a Trump supporter does not mean I've sacrificed my independence. And I won't be guilted or shamed into feeling otherwise. I say that, but I'm often feeling the pull from people who reach out to me. Brian, turn back. There's still time. Turn back. And I say, I'll make my own decisions. I always have and I always will. So I appreciate everyone's concern for my mental health and my well-being and my reputation. I really do. But ultimately, I'm going to be the one who decides to make a U-turn if I ever get to that point. And I'm not sure I will. Again, if improper behavior relating to Jeffrey Epstein and the abuse of minors comes to light, I'll have to pull the plug on my support, even though I would then say, well, yeah, I'm pulling my plug, but I got to admit, he's been a good president. So something of that nature would get me to pull the plug. If he tanks the economy and it doesn't recover, I'll have to say, okay, I was wrong. He fucked up. But it took a long time, and it was a careful, methodical process for me to come over to this camp. And barring something extraordinary, it's going to take an equal amount of time and thought for me to leave it. So again, this is what the second season is all about, going deeper. This may have not been the most deep episode. I'm not going to do it all in one shot. I've got work. I'm getting married, all of this. But in time, I hope to flesh out all my doubts, all my hesitations, all my questions, and land in a more secure place of knowing myself and what I believe. And my opinion on Donald Trump will always just be a reflection of that. So anyway, thank you all for tuning in, and I will see you next week.